The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:08 p.m. in Budapest, where today is July the 22nd. So we're already now 1 month past the summer solstice. And the days, as I always say every time we come on, the days are getting noticeably short and brutally short. And so, as we head towards the sunless, lightless days of fall and winter. So, but anyway, on that very cheerful note, thank you very much, everybody who has joined me. This is the time for our Tuesday night live stream. And there are a few things I want to talk about. And I think I'm going to start off with uh, Trump, who today was entertaining President Marcos of the Philippines. It's always very strange when you get President Marcos of the Philippines, because of course I kind of remember his dad, who was the longtime dictator of the Philippines, and he was kind of much reviled by the Human Rights Brigade. And then particularly his wife Imelda. People remember Imelda Marcos. Spent lavishly. The people's money. Spent lavishly, and had the most amazing collection of shoes. I can't remember how many shoes she had, but she did like um, going to Paris and everywhere else to buy her shoes and handbags and everything else. So that's the president of the Philippines' mother. Anyway, Trump was with him today, and then he went off on an interesting tirade on Barack Obama, and of course all of the members of the Obama team that conspired against him in 2016, and almost brought his presidency crashing down. I mean, there's no question. If it could easily have gone very, very badly for Trump, but for, I think, the work of Devin Nunes and Kash Patel on the House Intelligence Committee. I think it could absolutely have ensnared Trump into a very serious impeachment crisis over his alleged connections with Russia, but they were alleged and they weren't true. But anyway, let's take a look first at what Trump said during his press availability with Philippines President Marcos. Let's take a look. Why am I doing this? Okay. No, I'm back. Click the wrong thing. So here is it. Here it is.
Caught President Obama absolutely cold. Tulsi Gabbard, what they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up to 2020 of the election. They tried to rig the election, and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences for that. When we caught Hillary Clinton, I said, you know what? Let's not go too far here. It's the ex-wife of a president, and I thought it was sort of terrible. And I let her off the hook, and I'm very happy I did. But it's time to start, after what they did to me, and whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go.
It's funny he says the ex-wife of the president. I think he means the wife of the ex-president, because she wasn't really his ex-wife. I mean, they've been together all of these years. But Trump has a way of expressing himself, which is always very strange. It's like he was always referring to the mayor of Moscow's wife. And that is actually technically correct, that whether he was constantly going on about this, the mayor of Moscow's wife. Um, and and so it was just always, it sounded very um, uh, peculiar, because it sounded like the mayor of Moscow's wife. It's like Moscow's wife is a city, and the mayor of Moscow's wife is the mayor of the city called Moscow's wife. Even though it is technically correct, I mean, it would just be more helpful if he had said the wife of the mayor of Moscow. I think, but that's so. That, again, the ex is suggesting that she was the ex-wife. She's the wife of the ex-president. But of course, what he's saying here is indeed true, because during the 2016 campaign, he had promised that he would prosecute Hillary Clinton, and then pretty much the first thing he said after he took the oath of office is that he had no intention whatsoever of going after Hillary Clinton. She has suffered enough. She lost the election. She suffered enough. I'm not going to go after her. That was a big mistake, because Hillary Clinton went out of her way to make life as difficult as possible for Trump during his first term.
After people, Obama's been caught directly. So people say, "Oh, you know, a group." It's not a group. It's Obama. His orders are on the paper. The papers are signed. The papers came right out of their office. They sent everything to be highly classified. Well, the highly classified's been released. And what they did in 2016 and in 2020 is very criminal. Criminal at the highest level. So that's really the things you should be talking about. I know nothing about the other, but I think it's appropriate that they do go.
May I ask you about that, Mr. President? Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard has submitted a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. From your perspective, who should the DOJ target as part of their investigation? What specific figures in the Obama administration?
Well, based on what I read, and I read pretty much what you read, it would be President Obama. He started it. And Biden was there with him, and Comey was there, and Clapper, the whole group was there. Brennan, they were all there in a room right here. This was the room. This is much more beautiful than it was then, but that's okay. They have nice pictures up. They came out of the vaults. They were there for 100 years. This is much more beautiful. We have the Declaration of Independence now in the room, which wasn't here. I guess people didn't feel too good about putting it here, but I do. But you know what? If you look at those papers, they have them stone cold, and it was President Obama. It wasn't lots of people all over the place. It was them too. But the leader of the gang was President Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? And except for the fact that he gets shielded by the press for his entire life, that's the one they look. He's guilty. It's not a question. You know, I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason. This was every word you could think of. They tried to steal the election. They tried to obfuscate the election. They did things nobody's ever even imagined, even in other countries. You've seen some pretty rough countries. This man has seen some pretty rough countries, but you've never seen anything like it. And we have all of the documents. And from what Tulsi told me, she's got thousands of additional documents coming. So President Obama, it was his concept, his idea, but he also got it from crooked Hillary Clinton. Crooked is a $3 bill. Hillary Clinton and her group, the Democrats, spent $12 million to Christopher Steele to write up a report that was a total fake report. Took 2 years to figure that out, but it came out that it was a total fake report. It was made up fiction. And they used that. Now, the one thing they weren't able to do was to, and probably the only thing I respect about the press in years is the press refused to write it before the election. They refused to put it in. The Steele report was a disaster. All lies, all fabrication, all admitted, and admitted fraud. She paid $12 million and the Democrats for that report to a wise guy named Christopher Steele. He wrote a phony report, and they wanted to get that report in before the election. And I'll tell you what, I talk about all the time, the fake news, how bad it is. But in this case, they wouldn't do it. They saw it, they read it, And they said, we don't believe it. And it was only after substantially, like,
It is very interesting that Christopher Steele was shopping around that report of his, that ridiculous report of his, and just about every media outlet had seen that report um, during the campaign, and none of them published it because none of them saw in it anything that could be corroborated. And this really went on through to about October, when Michael Isikoff finally kind of, it broke the dam. He um, did report on this the dossier, and then of course, as you know, when the Comey's FBI then submitted their FISA warrant against Carter Page, they cited Isikoff's report as if this was separate information corroborating the findings of Christopher Steele. And of course, the FBI vouched for the credibility of Steele. So it was the FBI that demonstrated willful credulity when it came to Steele's allegations, whereas the media actually kept their distance until after the election, when Comey kind of set Trump up. He briefed Trump on the Steele dossier, I think on January the 6th of 2021. And then Comey told the media about that his briefing, that he had briefed Trump on this, and that was the signal for Ben Smith at what in this case, so that ridiculous publication of his and they published that Steele report. But up until then, so it wasn't until January the 6th or January the 7th that they published that the Steele report. But Comey did this deliberately. I mean, Comey kind of essentially he briefed Trump on it for the sole purpose of getting that report out to the public, because he saw that the media were not going to just touch it until that was the news peg. He finally provided them with a news peg. Oh, I briefed the president on this Steele report. Oh, well, that's the news peg. Oh, well, the president was briefed on this the dossier, and then they can just simply publish the dossier or a summary of the dossier because Comey had briefed Trump on this. But there's no question here that, and we looked at the documents now, I think in a couple of podcasts. It's a conspiracy. There's no question. There was a conspiracy against Trump involving the highest, most senior figures within the Obama administrations, all the way up to Barack Obama. Obama instigated the Russiagate hoax. And we're going to take a look in a minute as to what criminal charges can be brought, because of course the consensus you no criminal charges, no criminal charge. I'm not sure. I think there could be criminal charges that can be brought. But let's continue a little bit here with Trump.
Like a month and a half after the election, that it got printed, and it was a big wisp. It was just like a bang of nothing, because the election had ended. If that report had gotten published by the New York Times or somebody, and I respect the Times for maybe only this, because they're crooked as you can be. They're a terrible paper, a crooked, corrupt paper. But for this one moment, they said, this is bullshit. We can't put this in. And neither could any other paper. Wall Street Journal's a lousy paper, very, very dishonest paper. As you see, I'm suing them for a lot of money because they do things very badly. It's got a nice name, but it's really, in my opinion, it's a terrible paper. And can be corrupt. But just so you know, they didn't take the Steele report, the dossier. Remember the famous dossier? I call it the fake news dossier. The news wouldn't publish it. And I'm amazed. They had 2.5 months. It was finished. 2.5 months. That was supposed to be what was going to happen. And it got published a couple of months after the election. And frankly, nobody cared too much about it. But that was a big thing. No, we caught Hillary Clinton. We caught Barack Hussein Obama. They're the ones. And then you have many, many people under them. Susan Rice. They're all there. The names are all there. And I guess they figured they're going to put this in classified information and nobody will ever see it again. But it doesn't work that way. And it's the most unbelievable thing I think I've ever read. So you ought to take a look at that and stop talking about nonsense, because this is big stuff. Never has a thing like this happened in the history of our country. And by the way, it morphed into the 2020 race. And the 2020 race was rigged, and it was a rigged election. And because it was rigged, we have millions of people in our country. We had inflation. We solved the inflation problem. But millions and millions of people came into our country because of that. And people that shouldn't have been, people from gangs and from jails and from mental institutions, people that we don't want in our country, people that we're getting out, dangerous people. 11,888 murderers, many of them 50%, more than 50%, murdered more than one person. I hate to say this with such a distinguished guest, but you know, they asked me a question.
It goes off on a bit, some, on his usual talking point. But then he comes back again, and let's take a look.
That Obama was seditious. That Obama was trying to lead a coup, and it was with Hillary Clinton, with all these other people. But Obama headed it up. And, I get a kick when I hear everyone talks about people I never even heard of. It was just, no. It was Obama. He headed it up. And it says so right in the papers. Got everything. This is the biggest scandal in the history of our country. And it really goes on to even the auto pen, because it all relates to the same thing. It all started the same sick minds. You have an auto pen, which is a tremendous, well, we don't have a president. We have an auto pen that signs everything. I'll bet you sign everything. You don't have auto pens. Everybody, who doesn't sign? You're the president of a country. But it's all that whole thing leading right up to the end of it is the auto pen. And the auto pen was used by people, and Biden knew nothing about it. Biden knew.
All right. So that's Trump saying. He obviously is urging the Justice Department to move toward criminal indictments. Now, I don't expect anything very much from Pam Bondi if she were simply left to her own devices. But there's going to be a great deal of pressure on this because they have the documents. Tulsi Gabbard has produced quite serious and damning documents, certainly enough, I think, to bring criminal charges. Now, would they succeed? Well, probably not. On the other hand, yes, if you bring criminal charges in the District of Columbia, then of course you're going to bring them against Democratic Party officials, officials who served Barack Obama and who are political enemies of Donald Trump. So you think they would naturally they would be acquitted. So that's clearly a possibility. However, it's still worth pursuing, and then you think, well, what statutes would apply? And now, obviously, there are the perjury statutes because a number of them clearly committed perjury. Now, the statute of limitations has expired on some of the perjurious statements that they made back then, including the statements of Comey and Brennan. But they've also made more recent statements, particularly Brennan. I think Matt Gaetz highlighted the lies that Brennan uttered when he testified before Gates's committee, and particularly Brennan was insistent that the Steele dossier played no role in the Obama intelligence community assessment. Of course, we know now that not only did the Steele dossier play a decisive role in the intelligence community assessment, but that he, Brennan, wanted it included. So we've got him there, and that the statute of limitations doesn't apply to him. This was about 2-3 years ago. Clearly, we've got him dead to rights. But I mean, let's if we look at something a little more serious, I've got a few possible statutes that might be of use. Let's take a look what I think could be used. So here is 18 USC 1001. This is the crimes criminal procedure, and then it says, except as otherwise provided in this section, whoever in any matter within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch of the government of the United States knowingly and willfully falsifies, conceals, or covers up by any trick, scheme, or device a material fact, makes any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or representation, or makes or uses any false writing or document knowing the same to contain any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or entry. Well, I think they've got that they have clearly made false, fraudulent, fictitious statements. They're all guilty of this. The Brennan and the rest who prepared the intelligence community assessment, the testimony before Congress, the stories that they leaked to the media, and clearly, when they had the instruction, instructions were issued in that meeting on December the 9th, 2016, in the Oval Office, to put out the story that Russia interfered in the 2016 election in order to secure election victory for Donald Trump. That was clear. The intent, the malevolent intent, was clear, and it was false, and they knew it was false because they knew that the intelligence community had not determined that. They just made that up. So there it says, whoever in any matter within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch of the government of the United States knowingly and willfully falsifies, conceals, or covers up by any trick, scheme, or device or material fact, makes any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or representation. I mean, how many false, fictitious, or fraudulent statements did they make? Lisa Monaco, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, makes or uses any false writing or document knowingly the same to contain any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or entry, shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 5 years, or if the offense involves international or domestic terrorism, imprisoned not more than 8 years. So, all right, well, there's no domestic. So, we'll have 5 years. I'm good. I'm happy with that. So that's one statute, 18 USC 1001. Then another statute. This is the statute that was used against Trump. Remember, Jack Smith used this statute against Trump over January the 6th. So 18 U.S. Code Section 371, conspiracy to commit offense or defraud the United States. So these were the charges that Jack Smith brought against Trump over the January the 6th event. If two or more persons conspire either to commit any offense against the United States or to defraud the United States or any agency thereof in any matter or for any purpose, and one or more of such persons do any act to affect the object of the conspiracy, each shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. So they were clearly defrauding the United States. I mean, if you're putting out a lie that Russia interfered in the election, that Russia interfered with the objective of securing the election of Trump, and you put out stories that Trump colluded, that people in the Trump campaign, people who were working for Trump colluded with Russia, how are you not defrauding the United States? You are undermining the election. You are undermining the election result by suggesting that the election was stolen through the intervention of Russia. You are defrauding the United States. I can't think of anything more obviously fraudulent than what Comey, Brennan, Obama, Lisa Monaco, Susan Rice did. 18 USC 371. And then there's another statute, which is 18 USC 241. And here we have, if two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, blah, blah, in the free exercise or in enjoyment or any right or privilege secured to them by the constitutional laws of that, or if two or more persons go in disguise on the highway or on the premises of another, with intent to prevent or hinder the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege of the secured, they should be fined. That's all. So, I mean, given all the indictments that they brought against people who had done nothing, I mean, imagine everything that all the cases that they brought against Papadopoulos, or forcing people to spend huge amounts of money on legal fees. Even if nothing happened to them at the end, they lost their means of livelihood, but they all lost their property and everything because they had to shell out millions on legal fees. And then look what happened to Michael Flynn. It was a totally bogus, and they knew it was a bogus case that they brought against him. So yeah, 18 USC 241. Two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, or threaten or intimidate any person in the free exercise or enjoyment of the right or privilege secured by him in the Constitution. So if you tie somebody up in the courts, knowingly, impoverish them, destroy their lives on a bogus, completely bogus case, and they knew that the case against Michael Flynn was bogus, but Flynn did not perjure himself, then yeah, that's clearly criminal. So that's just what I found today. 3 possible statutes that could be used. Now let's keep in mind, people, this is going to waste of time. They're never going to blah 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 blah. But remember, the Democrats, how ingenious they were. All of the statutes that they invented to go after Trump. January the 6th. Thought, well, he was just simply exercising his rights under the First Amendment. He delivered a speech. But no. They said no. He was defrauding the United States. Very, very ingenious case that they brought, and he would have been convicted. I mean, he would have been convicted in the District of Columbia. He would have been convicted, and then Jack Smith ingeniously brought the charges against Trump under the Espionage Act. When Trump was holding on to his own documents, these are the documents within his administration. But they was charged under the Espionage Act, which is totally ridiculous. I mean, it's never been done. No president has ever been charged under the Espionage Act. On the spurious idea that a president needs to ask the librarian as to whether he can take documents home. They're his documents. He can declassify anything he wants, but they said, oh, no, because he never said that he declassified them, so therefore they remain classified, therefore he was in violation of the Espionage Act. Very, very ingenious, and if you recall, the media were pretty much convinced they're going to get him. He's going to be convicted under the espionage. He will go to prison, just like they thought they're going to get him on the charges of defrauding the United States. He's going to go to prison, and it would have happened if he hadn't won the election last year. He would have been convicted, and he would have gone to prison for the rest of his life. And now, so as I say, that's 3 statutes that I have come up with, and I'm sure others can come up with other statutes, but it can be done. If you put together a proper legal team, you can go after Comey, Brennan, Monaco, and everybody else who was involved in the Russiagate hoax. So that's that one thing. Now, I notice people keep bringing up Jeffrey Epstein. Now, as I said before, I haven't seen any evidence of a giant conspiracy involving Jeffrey Epstein. I have seen no evidence that Epstein was working for Mossad. I've seen no evidence he was working for the CIA. If we go back originally to the case in Florida, which goes back to 2004, when the mother of a teenage girl, I guess she was 14 or 15 at the time, she made a complaint to the police. The police began an investigation that led to eventually charges being brought against Epstein. And then basically they worked out some sort of a deal with the federal prosecutors, which was Alex Acosta. He was the U.S. attorney in Miami at the time. And so they didn't bring any federal charges, but they brought state charges, and got very, very lenient treatment. So got tap on the wrist, spent part time in prison, and so on. And so the case after 2008 was largely forgotten. I mean, I paid attention to it at the time because I knew people who were talking about it, and so but even at the time I wasn't that interested. But there were people talking about it back then in 2007. And then it was forgotten until 2018, when the Miami Herald, Julie Brown wrote a series of articles about the case. And then, because of the whole Me Too hysteria of those years, 2018, 2019, he was arrested in 2019, and he wasn't gonna go anywhere. I mean, they had him dead to rights. He was going to go to prison for the rest of his life. I mean, there was just no way out for him. I mean, you see what happened to Harvey Weinstein. I mean, they just, this was Harvey Weinstein was a real big shot. One of the biggest figures in Hollywood, and they had him, sent to prison 25 years. Spurious. really spurious legal cases. I mean, they brought against Harvey Weinstein, just like the case they brought against Bill Cosby. These were all very, very weak cases. But once there's the hysteria, then you have no hope of getting off. Now, because of Epstein's death, there was a vast superstructure has grown up alleging all kinds of conspiracies and presenting Epstein as this key figure in everything, which is very odd because I don't think anyone really had ever heard of Epstein until this case. And then they heard, oh, look, he has all these rich, powerful friends. Now, the issue, first of all, is why did he get such a lenient treatment? And I have said I think he got a lenient treatment because he had money and he put together a dream team of lawyers, including Alan Dershowitz, including Kenneth Starr. And prosecutors do not want to face a dream team of lawyers. They saw what happened to them when they were up against O.J. Simpson's team, and it often happens like that. Once you get a celebrity defendant, and the celebrity defendant, he goes in with real killer defense lawyers, the celebrity wins. And you can go, Michael Jackson, and I don't know how many other cases. It's very rare for celebrities armed with killer lawyers to lose. Prosecutors don't like to do that. Prosecutors like to go after indigents who don't have the resources to hire the cutthroat lawyers. They're going to be easy, and prosecutors like easy cases, like perjury. That's the one they like. Perjury, easy one to prove, and that doesn't require any great deal of work on their part to win the case like that. So it's quite understandable why Epstein would have got a sweetheart deal. Just as I think it's understandable why Epstein decided to kill himself. Well, he's looking at prison for 100 years, and given his reputation as a pedophile, which I think is also very unfair, he wasn't a pedophile. Some of the girls, not some, but by no means all of the girls that performed sexual services for him were underage. But even the ones that were underage, they were only barely underage, 15, 16. Keep in mind, in most countries in Europe, even very conservative countries in Europe, such as Hungary, the age of consent is 14. Hungary, 14. Albania, 14. I mean, you go through Europe, almost everywhere, the age of consent is 14. So, if Epstein had done, had sexual, had these sexual services performed on him in any European country, that's it. None of that would have been criminal. So it's a misnomer to say, oh, he's a pedophile. It's not a pedophile. I mean, a pedophile means a child. I mean, it's like, the prepubescent child. That's a pedophile. He wasn't that. And as I said, a number of the women who hung out in his mansions were above the age of consent, even, whether it's in Florida or New York or whatever. So, but it didn't really matter. If you go to prison and you have the reputation of a pedophile, you have a very rough time in prison. It's, chances are somebody's going to kill you. I mean, as happened with some of the priests who went to prison, they got murdered in prison. So he was looking not just at 100-year prison term, but the likelihood that he would meet with serious violence in prison. So I mean, if ever there was a motive for suicide, now that doesn't mean I don't know for sure whether he committed suicide, but I don't think it's a mystery as to why he may have killed himself. 100 years behind bars is no picnic for anyone. Now, for the rest, the Mossad thing, I haven't seen any evidence of this. Now, it is quite possible, and I think, in fact, I think, it may well be probable that somebody who is rich and who is somebody says 14 to 15. Sue Johnson says 14 to 15 is junior high. Maybe, but as I say, you look it up for yourself. The age of consent in most European countries, in fact, in almost all European countries, is 14. I mean, to me, it seems awfully young. I mean, I'm not saying that that's right. I'm just saying it's a matter of law. 14 is the age of consent in most European countries. And you can blame whatever the sexual revolution for that, but whatever. But that's the law. So that wasn't the law in Florida, and so Epstein did break the law. However, one should at least keep a sense of proportion and say, well, okay, in Florida that is against the law. Had he been in Albania or in France, he wouldn't have been breaking the law. Now, well, just going back to the thing that let's say you have money and you hang out with lots and lots of important people, Bill Gates and Ehud Barak and Prince Andrew and Khashoggi and all these people who frequented his mansion. Well, it's quite likely that intelligence people, whether it's Mossad, whether it's the CIA, whatever, would come and talk to him and would ask him questions about his friends. And that's what they do. That's what intelligence people do. They go around asking questions. They want to know about maybe the predilections of rich and important people, whether he had overheard any. So Sue says he was recruiting from high schools. Now, you have to keep in mind that this evidence that people cite, these are evidence coming from young women whose veracity is highly questionable. Now, Virginia Giuffre is a serial fabulist. I mean, that is it. Maybe she had at some point maybe had been abused, but she's a serial fabulist, and she's an admitted serial fabulist. And she wasn't used. There was a reason why the prosecutors did not use Virginia Giuffre, whose testimony is really at the heart of the case against Epstein, but she wasn't used by prosecutors in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, because they would be challenged under cross-examination. And so a lot of these young women just make these stories, make these wild allegations. Oh, I was passed around from Prince Andrew, and then he passed me on to Bill Gates, and then he passed me on to Alan Dershowitz. These are all statements made by young women who have now become very, very, very rich women. They've made a lot of money. There's been a huge payouts by a number of different organizations. They've all become very wealthy. Just Virginia Giuffre, this woman Farmer, they're all very, very wealthy, living in luxury mansions from all the millions that they've made. They have every incentive to go on making up these stories because nobody really challenges them. They go on the media, and they go favorable interviewers. But the moment there is a case, and in fact, there's only been one case that's been brought in court and that was against Ghislaine Maxwell, and they didn't use any of these witnesses. And when Virginia Giuffre made these allegations about Alan Dershowitz said, "Okay, well, I'm going to sue you because you're making slanderous allegations about me." And she backed off. And not only did she back off, she admitted that she had made up these stories about Alan Dershowitz. So it's always just, before we rush off and say, "Oh, they were recruiting in high schools and everything else," what's the source of these stories? Have any of these stories been properly scrutinized? Because otherwise, we're going back to, what was that name of that woman, that senator from Hawaii, that God, that crazy one. But women must not only be heard, but women must be believed. In other words, every statement, every allegation by a woman must be believed. Why? People have, whether it's a man or a woman, have every incentive to make stuff up if there's money at the end of it. And I think that's that's the point. Now, I see somebody say, "Come on, man! Everyone knows what was happening." Yeah, everyone knows, except nobody knows. This is just you think you know, but that's because you're believing stories that have never been properly vetted. And in this atmosphere of Me Too, people are willing to believe, young women. And when you tell them, these young women who are claimed to be the victims of Jeffrey Epstein have now become extraordinarily wealthy. Money has been showered on them because of these huge payouts. Not only that, they continue to file lawsuits. They've now filing a lawsuit against the FBI, $600 million lawsuit against the FBI, because somehow they think they're claiming the FBI didn't properly investigate the Jeffrey Epstein case. So hey, give me my 600 million because I've got this very, very nice oceanfront property. But I'd like to buy another oceanfront property, so I'm now suing the FBI, and then you're going to keep suing ever more agencies or corporations because they somehow are responsible for what had happened to you. So that's the point. That there's every incentive to lie, and therefore the only way we can ascertain whether somebody is lying is when you go to court and then you face cross-examination. If you don't, that means you could well be just making stuff up. And the same thing happens, incidentally, with my own particular bailiwick, which is like war crimes trials, where the media breathlessly report war crimes and victims. They love the victims as they tell, "Oh, this terrible thing happened. Everyone around me was killed. I was the only one who survived." You put them up in proper cross-examination, and suddenly that story collapses. And that's the point. When Dershowitz brought that case against Virginia Giuffre, she had to admit that essentially I made it all up. And the strange thing is that that's on the record. That's not something that's, "Oh well, you just made, somebody made this allegation." No, it's on the record that she admitted that she had made this whole story up about Dershowitz. And yet everyone else seems to think, "Oh, but she may have made it up about Dershowitz, but what she said about Prince Andrew, that must be true." I mean, it's because people like Prince Andrew and celebrities, they make settlements not because they admit guilt, but it's easier to make a settlement, get this whole thing to go away. You don't admit any kind of a guilt, but then he goes away instead of a protracted case. And that I think is what happened with a lot of these settlements. Now, but anyway, I was going back to my point. It is quite likely that Epstein had dealings with intelligence and provided information on the people that he hung out with. Okay. That still doesn't really get us to all the various claims about Israel. That somehow he was doing some work for Israel. First of all, Israel is a money receiving operation. Israel doesn't give anyone any money. No one gets money from Israel. You give money to Israel. You don't get money from Israel. But there's also there's no evidence of any of that. But anyway, the point now is that what the media have done is they've created this link between Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. The somehow, I was watching CNN today, and I can't stand listening to it, so I just had it on mute. And every time I looked up, I saw that on the CNN screen was yet another picture, the same picture basically, of Trump and Epstein. Trump and Epstein at this party, Trump and Epstein at some other party. It's the same pictures, but they have it all the time just to given people this image that Trump and Epstein were hanging out together. That they used to, they were buddies. Now, and then the whole Epstein scandal morphs. Remember, we had one Epstein scandal, which was somehow that the Democrats were hiding the Epstein case, that they were sweeping it under the rug because this is going to damage all of the Democrats. Bill Clinton, maybe Hillary Clinton, and Bill Gates. They were all going to be tarred by exposure of Jeffrey Epstein. So that was the one scandal. And then when Pam Bondi declared that really, there was no client list, there was no, no big blackmail extortion ring, and probably he committed suicide. So once that happened, then the story morphed into Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, and that it's the Trump administration that is involved in the in this cover-up. Because, and why would he be covering up? Because, of course, there was the Trump Epstein connection. Now, there's no question that Trump and Epstein were friends. I don't think anyone has ever denied that. Trump has never denied that. The question is, so what? They were obviously friends up until 2004, and they seem to have had a falling out. Now, Trump says, oh, well, he didn't like him because he behaved badly at the Mar-a-Lago and so on. Others say that they had a falling out because they were rivals on a real estate deal. And Trump won out, and Epstein was unhappy about Trump's sharp practices, whatever. I don't know what the truth is, but I think it seems to be a settled matter that after 2004, there weren't any dealings between Trump and Epstein. Now, 2004 was before anything was really known about Epstein, about the case was against him that was settled in 2007, 2008. So the fact that Trump and Epstein had no relations after the settlement of that case would suggest that there's really not much to conceal. Now, that Wall Street Journal story is very, very dubious. I mean, in the first place, the that supposed letter that Trump wrote for Epstein for that birthday collection put together by Ghislaine Maxwell certainly doesn't sound like Trump. It's not Trump's tone of voice, and it was also nobody has actually seen this letter. I mean, if you're going to make this case that he wrote this letter, even though again this goes back to 2004, and therefore it isn't really damaging to Trump since it's before anything was known about Epstein. But even so, where is it? Where's the letter? Where is this book? This book that Ghislaine Maxwell put together. I mean, if people are going to treat this Wall Street Journal story as being credible, then at least they have to present the evidence so we can actually see this book and we can see this letter. Now, so we haven't seen that, but Trump obviously has handled this very badly. For him now to be at the center of this shows really bad public relations on his part, because I think he was always a peripheral figure. And so he's now he's through having bungled this the way they handled it, he's now essential to it. But I do think, though, that there is an argument. I never say, everything should be exposed. I don't know whether that's exactly the right way to go about it, because if you just dump everything, if you do a kind of a document dump and everything is just out there, a lot of people will get smeared who really haven't done anything wrong. After all, he clearly, many people were in Epstein's orbit. I mean, Noam Chomsky had dealings with Epstein. I mean, is it right to just dump everything out, and then we read a letter from Epstein to Chomsky and Chomsky to Epstein, and then that's it. Chomsky was obviously a pedophile, but he wasn't. So there is you have to be very careful if you just dump everything out there, and then everyone gets smeared as being pedophiles or sexual harassers or sex abusers and whatever. That clearly isn't really fair. So it does make sense to be very judicious in what documents are presented. Now, this 50th birthday party, 50th birthday book, I think that should be exposed, because now the Wall Street Journal has brought it up. We should take a look at it, who contributed to it, and see what's genuine and what isn't. But I don't think it's right to expose every single letter and every single email that Epstein wrote or received, because then a lot of people will get unfairly smeared, and their reputations will forever be tarnished unfairly. Who hadn't done anything wrong. They've never done any sexual abusing. They've never preyed on children or whatever. So I think you've got to. That's why hysteria is never a good guidance for public policy. Now, anyway, today, but this hysteria just keeps going on and on and on. And so today we had the Justice Department announce that they're suddenly, if not exactly reopening the Ghislaine Maxwell case, and there was clearly Ghislaine Maxwell was unfairly treated. I think she was clearly railroaded by prosecutors and given a ridiculous sentence. 20 years. I mean, that's just insane sentence. And the trial was obviously a travesty. But anyway, the DOJ issued this statement, and here we are. And so this is from Pam Bondi. Statement. It came on her account, but Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, that used to be Trump's attorney, says this Department of Justice does not shy away from uncomfortable truths, nor from the responsibility to pursue justice wherever the facts may lead. Joint statement by the DOJ and FBI of July the 6th, that's the one that started this whole brouhaha, remains as accurate today as it was when it was written. So that was the one that basically said no client list, no big blackmail ring, and no murder. Namely, that in the recent thorough review of the files maintained by the FBI in the Epstein case, no evidence was uncovered that could predicate the investigation against uncharged third parties. And then she goes on, President Trump has told us to release all credible evidence. If Ghislaine Maxwell, she misspells Ghislaine, but okay, I mean, it's not an easy name to spell. If Ghislaine Maxwell has information about anyone who has committed crimes against victims, the FBI and the DOJ will hear what she has to say. Therefore, at the direction of Attorney General Bondi, I have communicated with counsel for Ms. Maxwell to determine whether she would be willing to speak with prosecutors from the department. I anticipate meeting with Mr. Maxwell in the coming days. Until now, no administration on behalf of the department had inquired about her willingness to meet with the government. That changes now. So, I have communicated with counsel for Ms. Maxwell to determine whether she would be willing to speak with prosecutors from the department. I anticipate meeting with Ms. Maxwell in the coming days. Until now, no administration on behalf of the department had inquired about her willingness to meet with the government. Okay, that changes now. And then Eh, I'm back. There was an internet outage. Can anyone, does anyone hear me? Anyone at all? Because, yeah, it was the first time ever. There just based sudden internet outage, and now I'm back. But I'm not sure that anybody is here. Um, Anybody uh, can hear me. So anyone at all? Let me don't know how he's back. That's it, Marty. God, I'm so happy to hear from you. I'm back. I'm back. Yeah, internet outage. Julian, yes, we do. Thank you so much. You know, we you can. Luckily, we do. I appreciate that. So, yeah, thank you very much for sticking with me. I mean, it's the first time ever. Just sudden, boom. You know, the internet just went out. Then I had to do all the usual things of unplugging the modem and all the rest, and rebooting and everything. So I'm back, and I can hear it on YouTube. Don White says, "Okay, I'm glad I can be heard." So I'm really happy. All right, let me um, since we lost this time, let me go and address the some of the points that were made on our locals page. You know, these are the people who care passionately that the dogs be fed and watered. They don't care about me being fed and watered, but they do think that the dogs should be. So I really appreciate our contributors on our locals page. So first is Danaki. Always good to see you. So Danaki says, "Dear George, since I've become totally disinterested in that piece of shit, Zanon No War, could you talk a bit about the situation in Hungary and what the mood is 9 months before the election? Are the people content or ready to finally get rid of Orban?" Well, it's a very interesting question because I tend to be a bit pessimistic, and my feeling is that Orban, who has now been there for 15 years, is kind of getting on people's nerves. I mean, he's certainly underwater in the polls, um, and people get bored, they get tired of the same leader because not only has he been in power for 15 years, 16 by the time of the next elections. But before that, he was in power from 98 to 2002. So then there was the 8-year interregnum when the left was in power. So essentially, he's been there since 98. And people are naturally getting a little bored with him. Now, what's working for him and has worked for him in the past is that the opposition doesn't exactly generate any enthusiasm. So even people who you meet them in Hungary, who will tell you what an awful person Orban is and how much they hate Orban and how they want to see the back of Orban. When you ask them, well, what do you think of this Magyar Peter guy, who is going to be leading the opposition into the next election? They say, I don't want him either. And I think that's been the case. Like last time was Marquis. There was just no enthusiasm for him. And I think that's going to work in Orban's favor. That no one really is very excited about his opponents. Um, the the question then is how much, by way of resources, will the EU throw against him? I imagine they'll throw quite a bit to get him out. But I've been thinking about the relationship between the EU and Viktor Orban. And I'm slowly coming around to the conclusion that the EU is not unhappy to see Orban in Budapest, because with this constant Punch and Judy show between Brussels and Orban, it gives this image that the EU is this place where really vigorous debate, real ideas thoroughly kicked about, and there's conflict and everything, and then in the end, Orban always comes around. So we go through. It's a little like a sitcom. Beginning of a sitcom. There's Orban. There's Szijjártó. Absolutely, Hungary is going to do that. We're not kowtowing to Brussels. We're just going to do what's in the interest of Hungary. Hungary is a sovereign country. No one tells us what to do. We're going to go ahead and do it. We don't care anything about Brussels bureaucrats. So, that's the start of the sitcom. Orban and Szijjártó. Then we get all the bluster from Kaja Kallas and the rest of them, and then the Germans say, well, we can't have one country, Hungary, holding up the rest, and we need weighted voting. We can't have unanimity, and we go through this. It's a regular thing every year, and then when it's time for voting for the next round of sanctions, we've now had 18 rounds of sanctions. Somehow, after all the talk about Orban, we need a Russian energy. We can't go without the energy, blah, blah. And then, lo and behold, Orban votes with the rest of them. He's gone along with all this. 18 rounds of sanctions, and Orban has supported all of them. He gets carve-outs. They give special carve-outs for Hungary, and I imagine they'll continue to give Hungary carve-outs. But all the rest, all the hysteria about that other European countries are going to follow Orban in defying Brussels, it hasn't materialized. It's always Hungary it's the one that opposes Brussels. So he plays the role of the bad boy. That's Orban. He's the bad boy. And it provides a certain levity and entertainment in the classroom, but it never goes too far. It never gets to a kind of a serious rift where anyone is really contemplating getting rid of unanimity in voting, and what he's really contemplating kicking Hungary out, and so Orban sort of has this ally now, Robert Fico from Slovakia, and he's a bit of an Orban type himself. He's going up to the brink. I'm not going to put up with it. That's it. I've had it. I'm sick of this. But he eventually goes with the flow. Now, just as we have these rifts between Hungary and Ukraine, and we've talked about them. They're accusing each other of spying. There's this case of this ethnic Hungarian in Ukraine who was apparently beaten to death because he didn't want to be mobilized to fight in the Ukrainian army, and Hungary is obviously protesting about the killing of a Hungarian citizen and a Hungarian national. But this again never really gets very far. It's not like Hungary is really going to separate from Europe on Ukraine. If Hungary really wanted to hurt Ukraine, it could hurt Ukraine. It could absolutely veto any sanctions package against Ukraine. It could absolutely deny electricity for Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine gets most of its electricity imports from Hungary. Hungary could deny Ukraine electricity. Hungary hasn't done any of these things. So, that's why I'm thinking that, does the EU really want to get rid of Orban, or is he just somebody who's actually quite a useful foil for Brussels, so that come the election, we're going to be back doing the Punch and Judy show, Kaya Kallas beating Orban over the head, and Orban beating Kaya Kallas over the head, and then, once they've beaten each other over the head, they're going to kiss and make up and agree on the next round of sanctions. So I'm just putting it out there that, that they may not um, they may not be that concerned about Orban's re-election. It was interesting that this recent LGBTQ whatever demonstration in Budapest, the media wrote about so excitedly. I mean, the world media writing about this huge parade. And the only reason they wrote about it is that Orban, or the Hungarian parliament, had outlawed these kinds of demonstrations advocating on behalf of homosexuality. And so, we have to defy Orban. And people from all over Europe, all over the world, for all I know, descended on Budapest for this big demonstration for gay rights. And as I say, the media wrote about this, but that only plays into Orban's hands. I mean, the idea that this is a humiliation, this is a rejection of Orban. Well, in the first place, the people who took part in this demonstration, the Hungarians that took part, they're people from Budapest. They don't like Orban. They've never liked Orban. They have no intention of ever voting for Orban. So that doesn't matter that they took part in this demonstration. Or you've got various Europeans who descended on Budapest. They don't get a vote in Hungary. But with this kind of parade, and then you have all the photographs of half-naked men prancing around and wearing all kinds of costumes and Nazi uniforms or whatever it is that they wore. You publish those pictures, on the internet, and publish those pictures in the newspapers. That's just going to turn Hungarians off. I mean, Orban needs that solid conservative countryside vote, the non-Budapest vote that he always gets. He needs them to show up to vote for him. And the best way to get them to show up to vote for him is to say, well, if Orban goes, you're going to have this every day. Is that what you want? Naked men prancing around, wearing, Nazi uniform regalia as part of some sadomasochistic ritual. Is that what you want? Hungarians will say, no, we don't want anything like that. And that will help to vote for him. So, just long-winded way of answering the question is that, yes, he's underwater in the polls. Yes, people are tired of him. He's been around for so long. But I think there's no real enthusiasm for his opponent. And knowing the sort of the opposition and the left, they overplay their hand. And I think they overplayed their hand with that whole LGBTQ stuff. And if Brussels does that, and does more of these things, that's just going to play into Orban's hands. I think that they kind of walked into a trap that Orban set for them. I think he kind of knew that they would do this whole thing of, hey, we're going to defy Orban's government and still hold our parade. We don't care what, let him unleash his police on lesbians and gays. Of course, they didn't unleash anything, but I think it strengthened his hand rather than weakened it. Anyway, thank you, Donaki. Judy, always very good to see you, Judy Hotchkiss. And Judy Hotchkiss has posted. Let me click on this Truth Social. What does it say? This Truth Social. posting from Trump. Um, V for Vendetta, December the 9th, 2016, the meeting that changed everything. And there it is. Tulsi Gabbard calls for Obama to be prosecuted. So I quite agree. I don't know, Judy, whether you heard my introduction earlier, where I can identify at the very least three statutes under which Obama and people can be prosecuted, and that's not even counting all the statutes about perjury, and I'm sure there are other statutes that people can find. I'm sure Robert Barnes could find a few other statutes that can be used against them. Well, will you get a conviction in D.C.? Probably not. But it's still worth doing, and it's worth bringing these cases. Um, as I said, the Democrats showed themselves to be quite ingenious in bringing cases against Trump that nobody would have dreamt anybody would do against a former president. Defrauding the United States, Espionage Act. I mean, it's unheard of to bring these charges against a former president. They did it, so absolutely the Justice Department can do it. If Pam Bondi takes over the case, it's not going to happen. If she, however, delegates it to some killer lawyers, then something may happen. I mean, there are a lot of very clever lawyers, who can use these statutes, and so I definitely think there needs to be accountability. Brennan, Comey, Lisa Monaco. They conspired against the United States. They conspired to destroy the presidency. They conspired to destroy a man who had won an election. They tried to overturn an election result. That needs to be criminally prosecuted, and that is absolutely it's a crime against the United States, and it shouldn't be that difficult for any clever, ruthless lawyer to bring charges against that crowd. So, but anyway, Judy, thank you so much as always for your contribution and for all of your comments and observations. You're not all often in agreement with me, but I always find your disagreements enjoyable and very stimulating. So thank you as always, Judy. Danaki says, where there's sirens in the background, whenever I hear them, I'm thinking of Ursula's goon squad preparing the tools to take George to the dungeon. Yeah, I do. I'm afraid of that myself. Ursula does come across as a very formidable dominatrix. She's kind of petite and she's very well turned out and very has a certain gentle, gracious manner. She comes from a wealthy family, had a very nice upbringing, so she has that the sort of the cultivated manner of the upper crust everywhere, whether it's Germany, in England, France, wherever, she brings all those good manners with her. But that she is an absolute sadist. Behind all that those very polite manners, very, very nasty piece of work. So anyway, thank you, Danaki. Thank you for worrying about me. Cynthia, very good to see you, Cynthia. Thank you so much for your generosity. And yesterday we had a screening of Henri Georges Clouzot, or Clouzet, not Clouzot. Clouzet's film Les Diaboliques, and a very good film. It's up on our locals board. Everyone's welcome to watch the film. It's in subtitles. It's in French, but the subtitles are really, really nice subtitles. And then above all, read all of Cynthia's very interesting and learned observations about Clouzet and the making of this film. It's quite a remarkable film. It's made in 1955, and it was joint winner of our Films with a Surprise Twist poll. And in fact, we had three joint winners. It's quite remarkable. And so I'm not going to obviously give away the twist. Everyone should watch the film uh, and discover it. See if you can actually figure out the twist before the end. But anyway, it's a great film. So do please watch it, and do please uh, watch and enjoy Cynthia's comments simultaneously. Anyway, Cynthia says, in Les Diaboliques, none of the schoolboys appeared to be rich. No, that's true. It seemed very much like a down at heels private school, and that's a very interesting thing. I mean, just as in England, in France, there are the private schools for the well-to-do, but there are also private schools for the not especially rich. I mean, some of the boys, I think, the one you remember the one there was one boy who was waiting for the chauffeur to pick him up. So some of them were a little bit better off, but you're absolutely right. This was obviously a private school catering definitely not to rich French families. So none of the schoolboys appeared to be rich, but some of them, when preparing for vacation, had a taxi. Oh yeah, so I didn't read that. Had a taxi or even a chauffeur to pick them up from school. Yeah. So was it true back then? Rich kids went to boarding schools that weren't posh at all. Yeah, I think so. I think that was a that was again it was a. I mean, I'm not um, an expert on the French education system, but in England, absolutely. You have what used to be known in England as the minor public school, because you always think of public schools. As everyone knows, public schools in England are actually private schools. I mean, they got the name public schools because they were in contrast to the education that was received by the children of the rich. They used to get an education at home. They had private tutors, and they would be taught at home by the tutors. But then they created schools for for pupils, and but you had to pay for them. But that's why they were called public school, as opposed to the private education that you would receive at home. So that's how that term was coined, that the public schools. But public schools in England are private schools, um, and as opposed, so in contrast to public school, there are the state schools that's just provided by the government. So you have public schools and state schools. But in the United States, state schools are called public schools. But anyways, but so when it comes to public schools, you always think of the famous ones, which are absolutely for the rich parents. Eton, Harrow, Winchester, Rugby, um, and there was many of them, and they're very expensive. But there were minor public schools that definitely were boarding schools, and definitely did not cater for the children of the wealthy. I mean, they weren't bad. You didn't get a bad education, but they were definitely not the fancy schools. So you always think, oh, he went to a public school. Oh, that then you think, oh, it must have been Eton or Winchester. No, it was just a minor public school. And I would imagine they were kind of dismal, just as this school was pretty dismal. I mean, I don't think the dormitories were at all pleasant, and I'm sure the food wasn't great. Um, and However, the public schools in England, I mean, they weren't exactly, it's not like you were living in the lap of luxury. I mean, they were quite hard. Um, you had to get up early in the morning, very early in the morning. Cold showers. Always had to be a cold shower in the morning, irrespective of what the weather was. I don't think the food was great. Um, I mean, I went to a what's called a public school. Now, it wasn't a boarding school, so it was a day school. You go there and then you come home. But it was a public school in the sense that you had to pay for it. Um, and the food was pretty miserable. So you know my parents paid for it, but they certainly weren't paying for um, tasty grub. So anyway, to go back to Cynthia's question. Or was that scene simply added to add some humor to the film? I doubt rich kids today would attend such a dilapidated school and live and eat like poor kids. If anything, it's now a cushy country club all the way for them. Well, I would imagine that there are, um, the minor public schools continue to operate, um, and and you don't get the best education in the world there. You don't get great comfort there, but you have to. And this gets into a very difficult area, which is uh, parents. Worry about sending their children into state schools for all sorts of reasons. We don't need to get into the details, but nonetheless, they're not at all happy with state schools. Now, they don't want to go to a state school. Their children are not necessarily smart enough to get into the upper echelon of public schools, and above all, the parents don't have the kind of money to afford those great public schools. So they send them to minor public schools because at least they get away from the sort of inner city youth that they don't want their children mixing with. So it's basically they have to settle for these minor public schools that at least are affordable and that give their children a better level of education than they would get in the state school. Um, but I mean, you raise an interesting point about the film that it was a mixed bag. Some of the children, I think, came from you know quite modest families, but some of them were from a little bit more prosperous families. I mean, it all depends, I think, on the intellectual abilities of the children. I mean, if the child can't get into one of the better schools, one of the better fee-paying schools, then they have to settle. Even if they have money, they have to settle for an awful school like this. I mean, it's a terrible school. I mean, not just in terms of the food and the decor, but you have a sadistic headmaster. I mean, this is exactly the sort of the nightmare of sending someone to this kind of a school. And if you read the books of Dickens, I mean, you have a lot of these boarding schools. I mean, it was terrible. They were just horrible schools. Very poor level of education, and sadistic teachers, sadistic headmasters. So Nicholas Nickleby, read that, or David Copperfield. So you get lousy education, sadistic teachers, lousy food, lousy dormitories, but the parents are actually paying for this. So it's a. I mean, I don't think anyone quite described these as vividly as Dickens did, and I imagine it was much the same in France. It's just that one always thinks of France, like England, has very, very good schools, very, very good boarding schools where the elite go and where the elite are trained and who then go on to hold all those big jobs in government and corporations and so on. But not everyone gets into those elite schools. People have to settle for something less. Anyway, Cynthia, thank you so much. And but as I say, it's now cushy country club life for in the best schools, but not everyone gets to those. Dalton, we're talking Dalton. Yeah, very nice. Choate, and that's in America. Dalton or Choate. Yeah, very, very nice. But not everyone can get into those. Anyway, and then Cynthia goes on regarding the very last comment you made about that film last night, which I unfortunately failed to see. No, because I'm always a little bit behind Cynthia when I'm watching. So Cynthia finishes the film before I finish. So my comment by then Cynthia's already left the screening, which I unfortunately failed to see until the morning, recalls that right after Christina died, Detective Fichet overheard Michelle and Nicole explaining how they hatched a plot which would likely end in Christina's death. So, isn't it quite conceivable that the detective could serve as a key witness for the prosecution in any type of murder case against Michelle and Nicole? Well, he might, but it's the conversation between the two of them was quite perfunctory. He didn't make notes as he was listening. So, he may indeed be a witness, but they would probably be able to present a defense and say, no, I mean, he misheard, he misunderstood. We were just playing games. It's very hard to prove that kind of a murder inducing a heart attack in someone. I mean, I dare say you could do it. I don't know if it's ever been done. Somebody has ever been convicted of simply inducing a heart attack. In other words, making conditions of life so frightening and doing so knowingly so that somebody has a heart attack. I don't know. I would have thought it might be a challenge to prove that in court. Um, but you have a point. I mean, I think that he would be a witness for the prosecution, and since he's a detective, he has a certain credibility. People will believe the police and so on. But ultimately, it's just something he overheard. He didn't. It's not like there's a tape recording. If it was a tape recording, at least you could use that. But it's just simply, oh, I heard them saying that, and you say, well, you're an old man. You may have misheard what they were saying. But anyway, and then Cynthia goes on. Also, recall that when Christina was supposedly lying dead on the floor, Michelle only checked her pulse for no more than 5 seconds before confirming that she was dead. But since Christina was on digitalis, which can cause her pulse to drop as low as 40 beats per minute, she could have feigned death without him realizing. But if so, the detective would have had to conspire with the paramedics to hide the fact that she was still alive, which is a bit too fanciful to be believable. Yeah, I agree with that. I always find it interesting in these kinds of films um, and even in these kind of detective novels, the way people always confess. Somebody figures out how the murder was done, and then the murderer immediately confesses, "That's it, you got me. You figured out my plot. Yeah, it was such a great idea, and I pulled it." I mean, you see this in Columbo. Columbo kind of confronts the person, and then the person confesses, "Yeah, you got me, Lieutenant. Yeah, I did it. I worked it." And you sort of wonder why would anybody admit to anything? I mean, just because the detective claims that he's figured out how the murder was done, you say, well, okay, do your best at trial. I'm going to hire a crack attorney, and I'm going to see if I can beat the case against me. Much of this evidence is pretty circumstantial. But if you say, yeah, you got me, then they do have you. And so I always thought that was the weakness of all these of things like Colombo, but also of the mysteries of Agatha Christie. That after Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple work out how the murder was done, the person admits to everything. I absolutely, if I was the one who had committed the perfect murder and somebody has figured out how I did it, I would definitely not confess, and I would, try to take my chances at trial. I mean, I think that's what you do for self-preservation. So, but your point about the pulse, yeah, that's why yeah. All right. Well, I don't want to go into greater details because I don't want to spoil it for people, but. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I doubt whether the detective was in with the paramedics. But anyway, Christine, not Christine, Cynthia, thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you for your comments and all of your hard work for our movie night. Marty, really good to see you. And Marty is posts the picture. I think this is from Trump's wedding when he married Melania, and it was this in this photograph. They're all very, very friendly. I can't remember when this was, around 2000, 2002, whatever. So they're very friendly. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and there's Melania, and they're all having a great time. It's funny to sort of recall that era because now Trump is such a divisive partisan figure that back in the day, Trump definitely was not a partisan figure. In fact, it was always hard to figure out exactly what Trump's politics were. I mean, some people thought he was a Democrat. Some people thought he was Republican. I mean, he was always he was a chancer. He was going from one thing to another, but he always wanted to be in with all the successful people. So, of course, he marries Melania, and he has a big wedding, a big bash, and of course he would invite Bill and Hillary Clinton, and I'm sure a lot of prominent Democrats were there, and he was friends with Chuck Schumer and so on. That's who he was. The last thing anybody ever thought about Trump was that he's a divisive partisan figure. I mean, I think he was just a figure on the scene, an opportunist, but somebody who actually wasn't taken terribly seriously, precisely because people thought, what he really loves is celebrity. One day he's hanging out with Hulk Hogan, next day he's hanging out with Bill Clinton, and he was always making the scene. I mean, that was his thing. He was making the scene. Anyway, thank you for that picture. It's funny that Trump doesn't seem to age all that much. I mean, I think the picture must be from about 25 years ago. It hasn't aged all that much. I mean, it's so. Bill Clinton has really aged, but Trump hasn't. Anyway, Danaki posts the age of consent. Let me just quickly go on that. Italy 14, Serbia 14, Albania 14, Austria 14, 14, 14, 14, 14, 14. France is 15. So it's very, the one place that you would imagine would be less conservative than others would be France, but it's 15. So it's older. It's, France has 15 and Hungary is 14. Greece 15, Monaco 15, Poland 15, Sweden 15. Again, Sweden, you would think Sweden would be more advanced than Hungary. Sweden 15, Croatia 15, Denmark 15, Iceland 15, Romania 15. All right. Spain 16, Latvia 16, Norway 16, Russia 16, Andorra 16, Armenia 16, Belarus 16, Belgium 16. All right. So quite a lot of 16s here. Um, Switzerland 16, UK 16, and then he gets Ireland 17, Cyprus 17, Malta 17. No, Malta is 18, Turkey is 18, Vatican City is 18. So you would expect, okay, Turkey and the Vatican City would be 18. But enormous number of countries are 14. And what's so surprising about that is that those are countries that you would expect to be quite conservative. I would have expected Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Hungary, Albania, Italy to be quite conservative, but their age of consent is 14. But as you can see, 14, 15, most of Europe, what Epstein was doing would be legal. So anyway, thank you, Danaki, for that illuminating posting. And then Danaki reads out statement from the office of the office of President Obama, out of respect for out of respect for the office of the presidency. Our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response. But these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Well, all right. Well, that's what you would have expected him to say. Well, we'll see. It will be interesting though that the moment, if they do pursue these criminal cases against Obama, watch how CNN and MSNBC and the rest will immediately chime in and declare presidential immunity. Obama enjoys presidential immunity. So all the talk about no one is above the law, no one above the law, no one, including the president of the United States, is above the law. Suddenly, that's all we're going to go, and we're going to hear all about the immunity. You can't possibly bring any charges against Obama because he enjoys immunity. Anyway, the letter or the statement of Obama goes on, according to Danaki. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election. Widely accepted conclusion because of you. There is no widely accepted conclusion other than the fraudulent ICA and then that ridiculous Senate Intelligence Committee report, which was based entirely on secondary material. It was based on newspaper stories. There was nothing in it. There was no evidence whatever other than recycled stories from the New York Times and the Washington Post. So it's not a widely accepted conclusion. There is no evidence, no serious evidence that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. These findings were affirmed in a 2020 report by the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee, led by then Chairman Marco Rubio. Yes, because those Republicans, those Russophobic Republicans, who including Rubio, I thought the chairman was that idiot from North Carolina, who's now gone. That kind of a slimy crook. Forgot his name. What was his name? Burr. I think Burr. The but Mark Warner was really the moving force of that committee. But as I say, yes, it was about 5 volumes, but 100 times nothing is still nothing. You can present something in 5 volumes. If you don't have anything, it's still going to be 100 times nothing. And they didn't have anything in that Senate Intelligence Committee. Mueller presented no evidence of Russian influence on that election. No evidence, obviously, of collusion. Mueller was just going by the ICA. All of these documents, these claims of Russian interference, go back to Brennan's ICA. There's no other source of evidence. Well, what is the other source of evidence? There's a Brennan. No evidence that the Russians hacked the DNC server. No evidence. That's just again, claims put out by the FBI. No evidence for that. No evidence that the contents of that server were passed on to WikiLeaks. Let's just simply just keep repeating that. No evidence that the meeting in Trump Tower had anything to do with the 2016 election. I mean, you go through every single item in Russiagate, and each of them falls apart. So for Obama to insist on this, Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, and he basically is citing as evidence that idiotic Senate Intelligence Committee report by that crook Burr of North Carolina. Anyway, Danaki asks, Ursula cut your cable? It could be. It was a very, very strange. We've never had this problem. It was all of a sudden. And I wouldn't put it past her. Very nasty woman. Anyway, Richard Phillips says, you're basically going to say he's containment. I'm not sure who the he is. I don't know whether it's as I say, Epstein. If it's still about Epstein, I would say Epstein probably had links with intelligence. I mean, if you hang out with lots of rich and important people, the spy agencies will want to cultivate you and will want to know, can you provide us with some information? What's the deal with this guy? What do you make of him? Who do you think his friends are? Where do you think he makes his money? I mean, I'm sure the people come and ask him these kinds of questions. But that doesn't mean he was working for any of the intelligence agencies. Doesn't mean he wasn't, but I just haven't seen evidence that he was. And then Marty says, Marty, you cut the cable, and there's a great photo of Ursula with Giorgia Meloni. In every photograph of Meloni, she always has this very expressive face. I don't know what the hell they're talking about there, but she's kind of seems really amused by something, and she's kind of pointing a finger at Ursula, and you kind of wonder what the hell. What the hell? There's some private joke that they're enjoying, and you would like to know what that is. But yeah, it's always funny to watch Meloni, particularly when she's shaking hands with Macron. She's unable to conceal her intense dislike of Macron, so always good. And Richard Phillips says he's a faux dissident that crows loudly but ends up pecking seed from the hand of the EU. Oh, I think so. You're talking about Orban. Yeah, I think so. I think it's it's like a game. It's a ritual, and therefore, if you play this game, then it's quite important to have this. To maintain this illusion that inside the EU there are always dissident tendencies. That wow, look at the vigorous debate that's going on in the EU, and look at Orban is defying. I don't know how many interviews I've had over the years, and I'm always asked the same question, which is, well, do you think other Europeans are going to follow the lead of Viktor Orban? And I always say, no, I don't think so. I mean, this has been going on since 2015, ever since Orban really hit the international stage over the issue of immigration, and suddenly he became internationally famous for his defiance of the EU on the issue of immigration. That's 10 years ago, and I haven't seen too many states following him. Now, they have, in a way, on immigration, that they become more restrictionist. Not terribly restrictionist, but they certainly become more restrictionist than they were back in 2015. But on Ukraine, other than Fitzo, I haven't seen too much dissent. In fact, there's no dissent within the EU, and so we've had 18 sanctions packages, and Orban has signed on to every one of them. And I'm sure, even as we speak, that the EU is working on package number 19. And no doubt Orban and Siarto will be telling us we absolutely will not accept this, without some guarantees and cutouts and for us Hungarians on the issue of Russian energy. And then they're going to say, no, we don't, no cutouts. We're going to absolutely cut ourselves off from Russian energy by 2027 and blah, blah, blah. We'll have this back and forth, and they'll agree, to postpone the whole issue until next year. So, yeah, I think that's that. I think it serves everyone's purpose to have this this Punch and Judy show. Anyway, Danaki says, Germany, we can't have this dictator in Hungary. Also, Germany, BMW invests 1 billion in a factory in Debrecen. Also, Audi, Mercedes, classic case of controlled opposition. You're absolutely right. If you were really serious, if really, we're not going to tolerate, we're not going to tolerate Orban anymore, then this is a very simple thing. Just stop investing. I mean, absolutely, Germany. If Germany wanted to do it, Germany could cut Hungary off. Germany is the biggest investor in Hungary. Germany doesn't do it, and Hungary knows Germany isn't going to do it. Just as I said, if Hungary really wanted to make life difficult for Ukraine, what you have to do is cut off electricity exports to Ukraine. Hungary doesn't do that. So it's, as I say, it's kind of a Punch and Judy show. A lot of fun, something for journalists to talk about. It's, and Orban kind of leads his troops up the hill, and then he leads his troops down again. Apropos of that, or maybe it's not even apropos, it is very amusing now when Trump, who kind of interfered in the internal political judicial system of Brazil, because he doesn't like what's being done to Bolsonaro. So now Trump is being attacked for how dare he interfere in the sacred, sovereign, internal affairs of Brazil. This is a scrupulous, legal, judicial system that must be allowed to work its way out. Trump has no right to interfere with what's going on in Brazil. Now, of course, no one argued, no one claimed that in the days when Lula was being prosecuted. Then there was quite a lot of interference when Lula was prosecuted, eventually convicted and sent to prison. But it's always very funny that the same people who are outraged about Trump's interference in Brazil are the ones who are nearly always calling for that the EU needs to get tough with Orban. It wraps, Orban has gone too far. Whatever, whatever his latest legislation on LGBTQ has gone too far. EU needs to crack down on Orban. Orban's, what he's doing with the media is unacceptable. EU needs to crack down. So now suddenly everyone is for the sovereign integrity of a country's judicial process in Brazil. Now, if Bolsonaro, if he needs to go to prison, he bloody well needs to go to prison. But when Hungary decides, we're going to have a different way of selecting our judges, then EU needs to crack down. Apparently Hungary doesn't have the sovereign rights that you would expect. So anyway, Summer Petrus, always good to see you. Summer Petrus says, George, I went to an English minor public boarding school. Never did me any harm, although others may disagree. Yeah, well, I'm sure. I mean, it's but I mean, thanks for telling us about this concept of the minor public boarding school. I mean, I think that's very, very pertinent to what Cynthia was asking. Yeah, it's very much, they are ubiquitous in England. And I guess, I mean, probably it does what it's supposed to do. I guess it toughens you up. I mean, if you go to a young age and you have to live apart from your parents and just learn to become self-reliant, it probably does serve you well in later years. I mean, it's probably, I mean, I don't know what age you went to the boarding school, but I'm sure initially it was probably quite painful to be separated from my parents, but in the end it does help build character. So yeah, I'm sure it didn't do you any harm. But thanks for letting us know about the existence of this the concept of the minor public boarding school, which is what was the kind of school that was featured in Le Diabolique. And then Danaki has says, ladies and gentlemen, America first. Congressman Randy Fine, release the hostages. Until then, starve away. So this is a lie. Anyway, amazes me that the media continue to regurgitate Muslim. That's from Randy. Randy Fine is one of these horrific figures. Absolute Israel first. I mean, it's complete fraud that the whole America first. He is explicitly Israel first. It's quite disgusting that Trump endorsed him and regards him as America first. But interestingly enough, he barely won his election, his recent election. Barely won. I mean, his poll numbers were really tanking, and so this was a very safe district. I thought it was a safe Republican district. He barely won. So that leads one to think that his Israel first antics really did not go down well among Floridians. But he's truly one of the most disgusting characters in Congress. And then Cynthia says, I believe that woman on the far right in the picture that Marty posted above is actually Marla Maples, who also had an affair with Bill Clinton. I don't think that's Marla. Let me take a look. Close up. No, it's not Marla Maples. It's Melania, but she looks a little different there, and it's a kind of a sideways view. But it's Melania. It's not the Georgia peach. And I'm pretty sure that this photograph was taken at Trump's wedding, to which the Clintons were invited. So yeah. And Richard's phone says, looking at her, I can well believe it. I guess that goes back to the dominatrix of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen. And the Summer Petro says, thank you for the legal advice, George. I know how to say, no, Poirot, you got it all wrong, and I'll see you in court when sued for slander. Yeah, absolutely, because the cases when Poirot or Miss Marple or other detectives, as they elaborate and say this is how the murder was affected, that's really circumstantial evidence. It's an interesting theory, but it's still really only a theory. I mean, you think that's an ingenious theory. Boy, whoever thought up this murder, he's a very smart person. Um, but in order to win a case in court, you do need some serious forensic evidence. You got to prove that you did it, but you're making things very easy for the police and prosecutors if you say, yeah, that's it, you got me, I did it, and I did it for the money. It's just I don't think it's um, yeah, but I guess it's a literary device or a cinematic device. Um, and so, but anyway, Summer Petrus, thank you so much, as always, for your generosity. And then, where we have then tofu for all. Oh, God, tofu for all. Okay. Let's see. Let me click on this document. Jeffrey Epstein, police documents. 22, blah, blah, blah. Jeffrey Epstein, race, sex, time. The conduct a special battery investigation. Haley Robson sworn taped statements. Okay, so it looks like these were statements that were made. I can't go through this now. I'm not sure who exactly made these statements. Okay. I think this was the original. I may be wrong, but I think this was the original statement that was made by that which I think opened the case against Epstein. This was the 14-year-old. That's how it was made, and I'm not. I think it's clearly reprehensible to have sexual relations with anyone underage. I mean, I think that is reprehensible. And all I was saying is that not all of these young women were underage, even by Florida standards. I mean, some of these women, like this this woman farmer, she was in her 20s when she became part of Epstein's harem. I'm just saying it's not really a pedophile. Wouldn't be illegal in a number of European countries. And as I said, I think one always has to be a little bit careful before we accept the principle of that woman, the senator from Hawaii. God, what's her name? Himono, the one who said women must not only be heard, they must be believed. In other words, any allegation made by any woman must be believed, which is kind of an extraordinary thing to say. Well, obvious reason. I mean, why should anyone just be automatically believed because she's a woman? But that's it must be believed. So that's why I think one should be a little bit careful. Anyway, I think my time is up, and I'm sorry for today's. There it is. There's the Ursula. Ursula is on her way. So thank you very much, everybody who joined me. Really, really sorry about the internet interruption. Not sure what happened. It never happened before. So I'm really sorry about that, but luckily I still managed to get all my favorites on board. So I'm really happy about that. Next on Thursday, we're going to do this again. I hope to see you all then. Until then, thank you. Good night. See you Thursday. All the best. Bye-bye.